Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Becoming Monsters. This is Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, and we are going to delve into a lot of weird stuff tonight. I got my brother Dennis on, and we are going to really get into some weird stuff tonight. We're going to start off with gargoyles and flying humanoids, and who knows where we'll end up after that. So, that being said, I'm going to read the copyright to everybody, and we will get into the thick of it. Okay, this channel may use some copyrighted materials without specific authorization of the owner, but constitutes use under Fair Use Act of 1976. The copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of Fair Use 1976 allowances is made for fair use for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, parody, research, and general knowledge only. Per Title 17 U.S.C. subsection 107 of the Fair Use Act. Furthermore, Nighthawk and Dennis podcast channel and all of its podcasts uses the Fair Use Act for any and all information to be used for the sole purpose of informing you, the viewing family, of information for educational purpose, general knowledge only per Title 17 U.S.C. subsection 107. More, Nighthawk and Dennis podcast channel uses the UCut app and Splice app for all of its advertising music and advertising needs because it's free and I don't have to worry about being copyrighted with that music. Alrighty, let me get that off of there. I'm going to get that and bring my brother Dennis on. If I can get to that, to get that off. Stream is being very sluggish. Okay, there we go. And let's get Dennis on. He's thermally mugged. Okay.
Good evening. How's everything going, brother?
Good evening, brother. How are you doing?
All right. I got my buffalo bone handle knife out tonight, just in case. Might have to cut some monsters up. You never know.
Yeah, we may need it.
Yeah.
We may need it.
I have gotten a lot of my letter opener collection, which is getting to be quite extensive.
A lot of good feedback about. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback about the new show we brought out, Midnight's Monsters Beyond the Dark.
Oh, yeah.
So got a lot of good reviews on that. Yeah, that's going to go over pretty big, I think. So I'm looking forward to doing another episode of that. So let's see here.
I like your precept of it. It's not just cryptids. It can be anything classified as a monster kind of thing. That's what I like. Yeah.
Exactly. It could be ghost. It could be demonic.
Vampires or whatever the case.
Literally. Yep. Exactly.
Well, that's what we're good at, William, going off the rails. So everybody out there in viewer land, just jump on the train because we're going to probably go off the rails, right? Jump on that train when you can.
More than likely.
But I've got
more than likely we will.
Since we're talking about flying humanoids and stuff like that tonight, I've got a story I'm going to share with you. I've never shared it with anybody, I don't think. And it's an interesting story. And it has to deal with the Lechusa. You know what the Lechusa is? The owl woman. The owl witch.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
Yeah, you know a little bit about that.
Yep.
And, well, I had this interesting case that happened. And it took place, actually, in New Mexico. And it took place with a young guy. He had a ranch. It reminds me a lot of our friend Shane. He had a young family, had a ranch, and one night, and every ranch is sort of like part ranch and part farm. Sometimes you got some farm stuff, and you got some Western ranch stuff, And this guy, he was, I think he might have been, I think half Mexican or whatever, Latino, whatever the tag you want to put on it. And actually, I think, no, I'll tell you that, but it wasn't half Mexican. I think he had a Comanche in him or something. It was something like that. He was, either had some indigenous blood in him or something like that. But anyway, he had this ranch and he had some chickens. That's why I'm talking about the farm part. Just about every ranch has some chickens because you get eggs that way and you get something to fry up sometimes. So one night, and he was probably, I guess, in his probably late 20s. One night he hears a commotion out of the chicken house, the chicken pen, and he grabs his gun. He figures it's, some animal messing with his chickens, whether it's a fox or coyotes or whatever. So he grabs his shotgun. He had a double-barrel shotgun, one of those old breeder type shotguns. And he grabbed it and ran outside. So when he got outside, he started seeing chicken feathers around there on the outside of the pen. And he followed the chicken feathers and he went around towards the back where there was a big old dead tree. He'd been meaning to take this tree down for a long time. It was a big dead tree. I guess it might have been an oak tree or something. I don't know what. But anyway, he said he got to the bottom of the tree. There were chicken feathers and pieces of chicken everywhere, laying on the ground. And he looks up, there's a movement. And he looks up in the tree. Now, this is dark out there. And this is away from him. He had outside lights that he turned on. But this was away from those. And he was sort of in the darkness. I think he was out sort of back behind his barn, if I remember correctly. And he looks up in this tree, William. And he sees these two red eyes looking back at him in the dark. And up on the limb, he's sitting on a very high limb that had to be at least 10 or 12 feet off the ground. There's a big shape sitting there. And he said he shined his flashlight on it. And when he did, he could see it was the biggest owl, he said, or what he took it to be when he first looked at it. The biggest owl he'd ever seen in his life. This thing was huge. And he said it was so heavy that the big branch that it was on was even bending down a little bit. And he said, but the weird thing about it, this didn't look like a regular owl. He said its face was kind of distorted. But honest to God, that's what he told me. He said it looked like an old woman's face. And he startled him so bad, he backed up. He backed up. And he said, I didn't even think about shooting at it. I was so scared. I was so startled by seeing this thing, And he backed up and said it screamed at him. And he said the scream, he said, this is what he told me, and this is the interesting part. It's downright demonic, okay, in his perception. He said it hurt me all the way to my soul. The scream did. Said, and that thing flew off and flew over his head. And he said the wind almost knocked him down. Said he ran back in the house. He said, I didn't sleep anymore that night. My wife had to sit up with me and hold my hand. Said, I was that disturbed. He said, I'm a cowboy kind of guy. I just, that does nothing like that ever rattled me before. I've seen mountain lions, just bobcats and all that. But nothing like this had ever rattled me before. He said it bothered him so bad, he called his grandfather. And his grandfather, I think, was Comanche or part Comanche, was a shaman, a shaman. And he asked him, he told his grandfather what happened. And he said, well, son, what you saw was a chusa. He said, you didn't look in his eyes, did you? He said, oh, no, I didn't look at that. I said, don't ever do that. The grandfather told him, don't ever do that because it'll get you in his power. It'll get your soul. And he said, what you got to do now is this. He said, it's going to probably come back because it scared you. In other words, it felt your fear. It felt all that. And it thinks it's going to be able to push you around now. Okay. So he said it's going to come back. So here's what you do. He said, get you some rock salt. Take it to a priest. Get the priest to bless it. then pack it in some shotgun shells to use on this thing if it comes back. Well, sure enough, the next night, same episode happened again. Dead chicken parts everywhere. This time it's on top of his barn. And you can see it sitting up on top of the barn. Well, she said, I didn't try to look at his eye. I didn't look at it. I knew what it was. She said, I just aimed a shotgun at it, and I let both barrels go on it. And he said, honest to God, it was like a big, he said, you could see the rock salt just blow up like a bomb, so to speak, just like a shower. And he said, when everything settled, there was nothing there. Not a feather, not anything. But he said, I never saw it again after that night. That's what you got flying around out there now.
That reminds me of that. Yeah, that reminds me of that story of those two young men, those young Mexican men that were urban exploring. And apparently they urban explored this warehouse. And the one young man felt kind of apprehensive going in, and he tried to tell his buddy, I don't want to go in. I got a bad, and his buddy didn't want to listen. So they went in and entered this big opened area, and they said they got about, a couple minutes into the building, and they noticed this big owl-looking thing sitting on a metal rail, and it turned and looked at him, and it had the face of a woman. And they said the next thing they knew, this thing let out a screech and opened up its wings and started chasing them. And they ran up these stairs and closed the door behind them. And in that little window pane of the door that they closed behind them in a stairwell, it was the face of this owl woman. And anyways, apparently she must have gotten around the door situation, and she confronted them in another room, and they basically had to crawl out and lock the door to lock her into the room, and then they escaped out the side. So yeah, the Latrucia, that is an epic legend in the Southwest. That, and there's so many legendary flying cryptids and unknowns in the Southwest, and that includes Arizona, Nevada, Texas, all of them down there,
Mexico,
parts of
Nevada,
parts of Southern California.
I remember one story, William. One story where a couple of kids were chased by Lechusa, and it would almost got them, except they were able to go into a churchyard cemetery, a churchyard, and it stopped outside because it's consecrated ground supposedly. You can't go in there, and it stopped outside, and that was the only thing that saved them, was that they got on holy ground.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. A lot of these, and a lot of these are indigenous legends, right from the indigenous people in the area. The same with the whole gargoyle thing and the flying humanoid things. The flying witches and just everything. Texas is very well known. Southern parts of Texas, El Paso, that area is very well known for a lot of flying.
Look at the European connection to it as well, William. Look at the Owlman sightings in England and over in Europe and some areas in Germany. You got basically the same kind of a legend thing going on there, although we're worlds apart from each other, culturally speaking. You've got that same kind of a interesting monster showing up in different cultures. But that ties into the witchcraft, the black witchcraft, the dark arts, that you're able to take on images and forms of things. And of course, an owl would be one. A cat, which is another one, and so on. that kind of ties in deep ties with witchcraft, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, Ted says in Scotland that's the only real threat that he feels is a threat from above. So you would be able to answer that more than anything, since you have ties to Ireland, you know. So with some of the legends over there in Scotland and Ireland.
I've had the experience of being out in the dark in the woods and have something like that over your head. You whoosh, you feel that wind. Of course, it was probably an owl or a hawk or something, but still, it's unsettling. I mean, you know, when it comes from above, it's a little bit worse, you know, in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Let's see here. We got. Oh, can't see.
Lister.
We got.
Glad to have you, David.
Live. What? Okay, David. Okay, David. Drinking. Pass it around. So.
David's probably been out with that new dog they got, or the dog's probably been walking David. That's probably what it is. That's what used to happen to me. I would take my dog out for a walk.
Yeah, more than likely.
Having my dog walk me, actually.
Oh, good to hear a live episode. Oh boy.
Raven Creek Charms.
Now let's see here.
Well, it gets the older they get, and they get more experience, the braver they get. That's the way it goes with dogs.
Yeah,
but yeah, you know, I wondered, and the reason I brought that up at the beginning of the show is I wonder how many times these things are misidentified. Could they be seeing a gargoyle instead of a lechusa, or a lechusa instead of a gargoyle? I mean, when it comes to finding cryptids, especially in the dark, you got to realize there could be a little bit of a confusion thing going on there, you know, a misidentification of certain things. You know, we've always heard many stories of these things being on the roofs of people's houses. And you hear the claw marks on the roof and go out and see some of these things. And when you're in that kind of a mood, especially in the dark, it's easy to misidentify something. So it makes you wonder how many of these things may have possibly been gargoyles, or even natural things like a regular owl or a hawk, or whatever the case may be. Although usually hawks usually avoid houses. You don't see hawks on houses too much. Once in a while. But owls, they'll out anywhere, you know.
Right.
Especially they got barns and old buildings and stuff like that.
You know what you. Yep. Do you know what you see on houses and stuff up in the mountains of West Virginia? You see some alligators.
Well, you know, owls on your house are supposed to be portents of death. That's not a good thing to have an owl on your house, kind of a thing. I think it's okay if they hang out at the barn, you know, like a barn owl.
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, with my people,
Ted,
it's a bad omen.
It would be good, Ted, if you had some infrared goggles or something. You could check it out, see exactly what it is up there.
Let's see here. Yeah, Ted's got a point here.
Well,
Makes you wonder about the
there is.
411
It is
for
recorded in history that eagles have actually taken small babies, and they could do that. I've seen them lift dogs and cats, small dogs and cats. It would be no problem to an eagle to take something, a young, baby or a very young
yeah.
child. That's it. That we know is true. I mean, Oh, thank you, Reverend Creek.
Well,
I hope you
there's been
enjoy it.
reports of yeah, there's been reports, Dennis, of thunderbirds carrying off deer and antelope, especially up in Alaska. So and even in the area here along the Pennsylvania and Appalachian Trail area, there's reports of a giant flying winged bird.
Well, it would not be that far-fetched to me that a condor could not definitely do that. That's the largest known bird in the world that flies. And the condor used to range over all of North America, by the way. It from South America on up, and of course it's now on, I think, an endangered species thing. The California condor and all that. That is a huge bird. It would not surprise me if a condor couldn't haul off a deer if it wanted to.
Yeah, they have a 12 to 14-foot wingspan, but I don't think they'd be able to carry off deer. Because you're talking something
deer,
over 200 pounds, and that would have to have a lot of lift. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
a small deer, fawn or something maybe, but I don't think a full-grown deer. But I just have to wonder, though, and I think other people besides me have, if that could be the actual origin of thunderbirds. That that the Native Americans might have seen that the condor, were familiar with it, and called it sort of the thunderbird. If you look at the condor, it does look a lot like the Native American descriptions of the thunderbird. It has a lot of the attributes of it. It's dark usually. It's a dark feathered bird, and it has some interesting patterns on it. It makes you wonder if that's not tied in with it, especially anyway.
Right. I'm gonna put some pictures up here on the screen, and some cryptids that we hear being reported of. We've got this type of a winged creature, which is a winged humanoid. And here's another rendition of
if you look at that limb, it has a membrane very much like that of the flying squirrels. They have a membrane. Of course, it's not that thin, I don't think. Oh, very much like a bat, of course.
Right.
But it's sort of bats don't do bats do flap their wings and fly, but they glide a lot. They like the flying squirrels do. That's a bad looking thing. I got a question I want to ask you. I'm just curious to see what you think about it. I don't know if I've ever asked you this point blank question. What do you think a gargoyle is?
What do I think of this? I think a gargoyle is a creature known to come to life in certain times of the day or evening, and they're supposed to protect whatever buildings that they're on. But as far as nature in general goes, I would say that a lot of the confusion that people are having when they say they see a gargoyle are one of two things. It's either a flying winged bat vampire type of a creature, or it is a reptilian type of a creature.
Well, would you consider a gargoyle demonic?
I would consider a gargoyle demonic if it wasn't for the fact that I haven't heard any sites of reportings of them having red glowing eyes.
Uh-huh.
I always try to associate the red glowing eyes to the demonic because
Right.
it's just, the window of the soul. That's what we've always said. So
Uh-huh.
that's the
Well,
only thing I would hold back on to say it's demonic.
yeah.
But then again, vampires are demonic too, though.
Yeah. Well, I would classify as vampires as demonic, definitely, because they are reanimated dead people, reanimated by demonic forces. That would definitely be demonic. But here's the interesting tie-in with the gargoyles. Okay, since man has constructed buildings and places like that, there's always been a modicum of protection that they've done on these buildings. A lot of, I don't know if you know, if you're familiar with this, but a lot of the
Mhm.
buildings in England, the cornerstones always either had a dog or a cat placed in the cornerstone. Either it was live or dead. I don't know which one at the
Inside
time.
it, yeah.
I know this sounds horrific. This is horrific to think about, but that's what they would do. And it was put there as a guardian. That's what its whole purpose was. We've talked about the church crown. That's
Mhm.
what it was about. But this happened with cathedrals. It happened with
Mhm.
castles, all these things. And here's another thing you had. You had protection put on these buildings with witch marks. I know you've heard about the witch marks that they find in these buildings and the concrete and all
Oh yeah.
that. That was another form of protection. So I think
Mhm.
the gargoyle has a distinct connection to that because he is a guardian symbol of that building or that cathedral or whatever, wherever it's at. And here's another thing that people don't realize. 9 times out of 10, the gargoyle's depicted only as a head. It's a head on a building or a corner or something. It's not the full body like you see there. It's not the full body gargoyle. It's a lot of times, and they've got a name for that head, and it's called hunky punk. And that's a full gargoyle there. But a hunky punk is sort of a motif that they put on the building. It was another form of protection, but it was just the face of a gargoyle, a demonic looking face. And like I've told before, the reason they use the motif of the gargoyle is supposedly to fool other demons into believing, oh, there's a demon already here.
Mhm.
I'll move on somewhere else. Kind of thing, as if they thought
Right.
demons were that stupid. But anyway,
Right.
that's what the whole thing is about. But they are guardians. They have that connection to the building. That's part of the magic
Right.
that the architects used to do.
Yeah. I'm kind of jealous of this one's hairstyle. I kind of like his hairstyle.
Yeah.
It's kind of
He
got that
looks. What's
modern
them things?
green.
What's those? You remember those things they used to sell? The Kia Pets. That kind of looks like one of them.
Oh, the
The
chia
smooth
pets.
grass hair. A Kia Pet.
Oh, yeah. That's one of them. They're
Actually,
modern
funny thing,
gargoyles.
you can't see it, but I have a gargoyle sitting behind me over here. Full size gargoyle sitting behind me over
Uh
here.
oh.
Um, I'm gonna have to get a camera one day and take pictures for you. But anyway, I have a gargoyle, and I find it very. Here's what really attracts me to gargoyles. I find them very interesting because no two are ever alike, are they? You ever notice that? They're all different in many aspects. Um, but the interesting thing is the medieval feeling you get looking at these things. It kind of transports you back in time to another another way of looking at stuff. Now, most gargoyles have wings, but some don't. Some are not. I think that has wings. I can't tell for sure. It looks like it, but they might be close to the body or something. I'd have to get a better view of that. But think about the masonry that went into doing that right there. That had to be a job and a half to put that on the side of a castle like that. You know. Well, this is probably a water spout, of course, which is what they mostly were, decorative water spouts.
Yeah.
So they formed a function. They performed a service. They ran the water off. How about you, Tracy? Come in. You come in to Tracy one day, and you're all wet. And Tracy said, "Well, what gargoyle did you stand under?" You know.
Yeah.
You don't want to stand under the gargoyle.
Yeah.
You get wet.
I kind of like this picture here.
That one is a very famous gargoyle.
This picture
that was on
is really cool gargoyle, but
yeah, that was on Notre Dame. That's the church, Notre Dame Church in Paris. And you know, it burned. You know, a good bit of it was destroyed. Unfortunately, that probably got destroyed too. But that's a very good picture that you can see the Eiffel Tower right there in the distance. So that's Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Very famous cathedral. But they had gargoyles all over it. And of course, you know, that's where you get the famous story of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. My favorite scene in that movie is at the end when the girl that he loves so much, she's so hideous and ugly and deformed, you know. He's really pitiful to see. But the girl that he loves so much rides off with the man, and he's he's got his arm around the neck of that gargoyle, and he says, "Why weren't I made of stone like thee?" So it's an interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
Now, I find it interesting, Dennis. I find it interesting with this picture of gargoyle. I find it interesting how it's got flames coming up around the hind end of it.
Yeah. It's
like
demonic.
Like the flames of hell.
Yeah, the flames of hell. It's a demon. That's what it is. Yeah. That's what they are. Gargoyles are demons. But, you know, the legend is that there are gargoyles that actually come alive, that actually masquerade as statues. In the daytime and at night, they come alive. That right there is an ancient depiction of a gargoyle. It's in a manuscript, a medieval manuscript. But that's what the depiction of a gargoyle demon supposed to look like. And of course, it's got, I think, like a fire coming out of its mouth. It's got a snake tongue too, kind of a thing too. And of course, the horns and all that. So it's very demonic. I think that's on. I forget what codex. That might be the
diaper.
That might be from the Satanic Bible. I'm not sure. The Codex, the Satanic Codex.
It looks like it's wearing a diaper. I'm sorry, but that's not too scary to me.
Oh, it's pretty funky looking to me. It's a very funky looking demon. That looks like
some of these other ones we got here.
Something that would chase Elmer Fudd around or something, probably. Now that right there is a depiction of the demon Asmodeus, and he is riding a big rat, but it's sort of like a gargoyle too. If you look at it real close, it's got scales on it, and of course he has the wings. He's depicted as having the demonic wings, like bat wings, you know.
Yep.
And here's the interesting that's definitely gutter spout right there. Here's the interesting thing: if you look at their faces, they do resemble rats or rodents a little bit in the way they look, you know. And they're very reptilian too, very reptilian in that respect.
Yeah, exactly. And that almost makes you wonder just what kind of reptilian connection there might be to some of these depictions, you know. And you know, we've always thought that the demonic. We've always thought that the demonic was going to be, you know, could have been a misconstrued reptilian, for that matter too. So
well, the when you get to the imagery
it's
of the
not
demonic, when you get to the imagery of the demonic, you have two avenues that it goes in: insectoid and reptoid. Those motifs are reoccurring and interchangeable. They can be a combination of both. Um, but to me, and I've said this statement many times before, and I still stand behind it, if I were going to pick out any race of demons, it would be those guys. Because you see so much, not just in medieval times. We're talking about going back to very ancient Babylonian, Mesopotamian, Sumerian. They all depict demons in a reptilian sort of way. You know, that makes me wonder if they didn't have some inside knowledge on this. You know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that right there could be misconstrued as a demon right there.
And you could
Just by
also take
even the
that.
posing of it.
You could also take that to be a gargoyle to a certain extent. Look at it. You know.
Yeah, yeah, true, very true, very true.
You
And
know,
we all know that there is this coming.
The reptilians and the gargoyles could be interchangeable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And we can't talk winged creatures and stuff without obviously we need to bring up the most famous of them all, which is the Mothman.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell you something. There's something about him. Look at that depiction there with the red eyes. He is downright demonic to me. That's the only feeling I get about him.
Yes.
I mean, he shows up with their disasters. Everything about him, everything about Mothman is dark to me.
I agree. I agree 100% with that. Yeah, he is definitely supernatural being, definitely dark being. So yeah, I agree with him being demonic. So.
And there's an explanation supposedly for them being so many Mothman sightings at O'Hare Chicago Airport is because there's claim that a coven of witches opened a portal and let this thing out. And that's not that far fetched to me because that is the demonic. That's how you get in touch with demonic things. And they claim they've come out and claimed they are the ones that did that. So it makes you wonder if maybe there might be a little truth to that, you know.
Well, there is magic that that is used in the world for dark, nefarious and evil forces that are using it. That and from my previous experience dealing with the whole dark magic, there are so many things that a human is capable of doing. And I don't want to seem like I'm saying we could be gods if we wanted to be, because we can't. We don't have that ability. We don't have that within us to be a god. Okay. But we do have the ability to use in a fashion is our ability of manifesting things like we've talked about previously. And manifesting has so much to do with a lot of knowledge that we have lost over time. They talk about the alchemy and all that, and how they could open up portals with certain spells and stuff that they were doing, in the days of Merlin and all that. There were.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you on that, William. I agree 100% with you on that. But I will say this: there are certain things we got to remember this about human beings. we are very physical. We are more physical than we are spiritual. Although that's the problem we have. We're in touch more with the physical part of ourselves than the spiritual part of ourselves. Most of us are, in that respect. So that keeps us from doing certain things unless we have a power base in which to work with. You know what I'm saying? Now, you Native American, you've
Hmm.
always thought about getting that earth energy thing going, that nature connection, and that gives you a power base sometimes. And of course, we all know that prayer is another connection with your Creator that gives you power, that kind of aids you in that respect, your faith. You know what I'm saying? But now you look at the darkness, the flip side of the dark coin, the dark side. If you really want to get something done, you get in touch with the demonic. Now, you may be able, with the will and force of your mind, to do a lot of things in this world. And there's a trick to it once you learn that. But I think these dark forces, if that's what you're so predisposed to do, really help you out a great deal in that respect. You see what I'm saying? You got to make that connection, just like faith in God gives you that
Hmm.
connection, you know. And Jesus said something very important about that. The faith, that little bit of faith can move a mountain. And he wasn't talking about a psychic mountain. He was talking about a real mountain there. If you look at it, what he said. He was talking about a real force. So what we're talking about here is force for good or for
Hmm.
bad. And you got to hook up to it whichever way it goes. But now
Yeah.
the human mind and the will can be the catalyst for that. You understand? It can channel it where you want it to go. That's where
Hmm.
that dark arts comes in at. That's where that darkness and all that comes in. But you're channeling a power outside of yourself more so than something coming from in you. But it's still a connection, you know. That's just the way
Right.
it goes. And I
Right.
think people,
Yeah.
and if you ever hook up with these things, William, if you ever hook up with these things, like I was talking on Jessica's show the other day about the angels. Angels do not look human. Go look at their descriptions, okay? They are not human looking things, but they can
Oh
look
yeah.
human when they want to. They can look human
Yeah.
when they
Not with
want
six
to.
wings.
So
Not with
shapeshifters, everything is a
Yeah. Not with six
shapeshifter
wings and thousands of
can
eyeballs.
do this. Uh-huh, uh-huh. So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
flip side of that. But if you've got that power base, if you're hooked into it, plugged into it, you can get a whole lot more done. Now you got to do little things with your own sheer will of force and all that. But that's what all the rituals are about. That's why I'm putting on the pelts and the skins and the belts and doing the rituals and opening those spiritual doorways is all about connecting to that power for good or for bad. That's the way it goes. Well, condors really are scavengers, but if they
Man.
get hungry enough, they wouldn't stop at dead things. I don't think it's a matter of survival. All animals in nature do what they have to do to survive. That's how they survive. You know, I've seen crows and stuff, which usually are not scavengers, but they will scavenge if they got the food. They'll take advantage of it. All demons have wings, not necessarily, but yeah, most of them do, I think, because they once were angels.
Well, and we've already gone over to the the fact the fact that demons are shapeshifters. So they can depict themselves as not having wings, and then one moment
Yeah,
later they could have wings. Um,
uh,
it's whatever they depict themselves as to be. That's the benefits of being a supernatural entity.
right. That's the imagery thing. That's what they got going. The imagery thing. Talons on birds and needle sharp. Oh yeah, they have to be. That's part of their makeup. You see, the grand design of our Creator is so perfect. How can you say, "Oh, this is a mistake"? That it just happened this way. Look at the grand design around us all, people. I mean, everything is so perfectly made because it was made by a perfect being, not us. And everything came out the way it needed to be, although it's corrupted now. It's messed up by the curse that's on us. But still, look at it in its perfection when it first began. It was perfect. Everything was made just right. We couldn't do that. There's no way we could do it. Bat squatching.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and John brings up a good point too. I mean, you got so many other types of entities that are winged creatures like bat squatch. I actually used to have a picture of that on the computer, but I don't have it anymore. But it is described as being a Sasquatch with wings, with bat wings.
With wings.
So,
but would that not be demonic in a way, if you think about it? And like I've said this before, William, the demonic could use a lot of imagery of these creatures. You know, that's not that far fetched.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being a shape-shifting supernatural entity, you'd be able to change yourself into any cryptid creature you'd want and use as a disguise.
Dogman.
So,
Dogman, Goat Man, anything you want to do.
But remember the red eyes. The red eyes are the key. I'm telling you, the red eyes are the key. Yeah.
Well, here, I want to tell you this to people, and we've said this before. If you ever, I'm telling everybody out there listening tonight, if you ever confront any kind of a being, whatever it is, with red eyes, do not look in its eyes. Okay, don't do that. Do not make eye contact with it because it can go south real quick for you. You know what I'm saying? There you go. Don't make eye contact with it unless it's William's background. I think that's okay. But don't make eye contact with it. You're actually looking into the eyes of a demon. They can get power over you. Okay, they can form a connection that can do things to you, and they can get in. They can crawl. Let me tell you this, people. Okay, I'm not making this up. I've seen it happen. They can crawl inside of your mind. They can. They can do it. I think there's a limit to that, but they can do it. An arch demon proven. There are demons that are called guardians. They are. That's their specific duty. I ran into one time in all places in a liquor store. I wasn't in there to buy liquor, by the way. I was in there investigating, and it was a guardian demon. It was left by a warlock that once occupied part of that area, and it was a guardian demon. And they are bad guys. They sort of are very. Here's what they are. They're sort of like territorial pit bull demons. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, gargoyle and grotesque are supposed to be.
I agree with Ted on that.
They're guardians. They're guardians. That's why they're on the buildings. Yeah.
Yeah. As
I found it
culture
really
goes, even Japan.
I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember this, William, but I found it very disturbing that there once was a kids' cartoon about gargoyles. You remember that? And they made them out to be like superheroes or something. There was a kids' show, a cartoon about gargoyles. And I'm thinking, boy, did he pick out the wrong guys to make superheroes? They're demons. Okay. But that was a kids show. It used to be on Saturday mornings years back. I don't know how long it's been, but I remember that. Archdemons have they're sort of like your supervisor. You know, you got your regular demon, and then he's got a supervisor, and that supervisor's got a supervisor, and so on. It's a pecking order. Okay. Really, I think that's done to keep the cells in line for a certain plan or some action they want done. That's how you You know, in a bad army, kind of like the Nazis were, you were the guy behind you had orders to shoot you if you got out of line. You know, and I think that kind of goes with the demonic too. Oh yeah, oh that's interesting.
Amy, you'll have to take some pictures if you can, because
Yeah,
I would
that's
love to
it.
upload those on the.
That building should be demon free because it's got guardians outside to fool demons into coming in. So hopefully your building is demon free.
Scott's
Yeah, Scott.
All
Scott got
right, let's see
everybody on that
here.
one. Well, that is your man-made religion. That's man-made religion trying to get to that. Jesus was not reanimated. He was completely brought back as a complete different being. He was not a reanimated dead person. That's a big difference in that. That's where you get zombies bad. He did it symbolically. He was the Last Supper. You might remember. He told his disciples, "Drink this. This is my blood that I'm shedding for you. Eat this. This is my bread. This is my body that I'm giving for you." Well, it was all symbolic of a sacrifice. And here's what the interesting thing. It backs everybody that up. What greater love? There is no greater love than to lay down your life for another. And Jesus was putting forth the greatest love of all. He sacrificed himself for that. He wasn't reanimated.
Well, I know from being a culture Native American that and we did a lot of ceremonies and stuff with the dark arts. We sacrifice animals and stuff, and that is the same with Old Testament of the Bible. The Old Testament of the Bible did animal sacrifices. So, in fact, there's still a lot there today that do animal sacrifices to their god, whether it's Allah or.
Let's go straight back to the book of Genesis, Cain and Abel. Remember that? Cain killed his brother Abel, and God said something very interesting there. He said, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Think about it. And that's why the blood is so important. Okay, think about it, man. He said, the blood of your brother cries out to me from the ground, and since you have shed blood, I will require that from you. And that's where that blood sacrifice comes in. But God would not accept just any sacrifice. It had to be perfect sacrifice. It had to be without blemish, the best you could get. God said, "I deserve the best." You get the best. And that is the only way you can atone for your sins until Jesus came along, who was the Lamb of God, the sacrifice of God. It's all about the blood, though. It keeps going back to that over and over and over again. Blood, blood, blood. And protect the air. Okay. That sounded like that kids show I was talking about, Jessica, the cartoon morning show, but they made them out to be good guys instead of bad guys. I don't think the Gargoyles are good guys. They are guardian demons. And what always disturbed me about that, why the church did that, it's sort of like anti-Christian, I mean, to employ demons to help you out, that's not good in my book. That is a symbol of the sacrifice.
Well, it was original.
I'm not Catholic. I don't do that.
The whole gargoyle thing.
That's a symbolic ritual is what it is.
Right.
There are many rituals in the church that I don't think even God is pleased with, by the way. But that's another story. Hey, Susie.
Yeah, that's definitely for another story.
But like I said, the
People
whole
eat.
purpose, there are certain things you can do to protect areas and locations from the demonic. And that was the one thing they did. Hey, let's put up a fake demon and scare the rest of the demons off. But there were other things they did. They would put iron, like drive iron nails in each corner of the house on the property. Iron, of course, is bad news for witches and elves and fairies, the bad guys and demons. They don't like iron. Uh, and of course, iron was a lot cheaper than actually having to use silver, which was the best thing to use, actually, silver. But there, and you can say to this day, and I have actually seen houses where people put mirrors in the windows facing out. That's another form that they said will fool demons. They would see themselves in the mirror and say, "Oh, there's another demon in that house. We'll go on to another house." And that is what the jack-o'-lanterns for at Halloween, to scare the demons off, to think it's another demon. Hey, we're not going to mess with that house. There's a demon already there. So that the jack-o'-lantern is very much like a gargoyle. And by the way, in Ireland, they didn't have pumpkins.
Go ahead,
They didn't have pumpkins to make jack-o'-lanterns with, so they used turnips. You talking about something scary, ugly looking thing? Try to see a lit up turnip sometime. It's not good. Definitely. But a lot of these, superstitions, a lot of these things that were done, they were done out of fear. They were like, my grandpa always did that. I guess I can do it too, kind of a thing. Got handed down generation to generation, And there were safeguards. They were sort of, what we call hex signs now. There were safeguards against the evil forces that were out there. They could destroy your crops, make your cows dry up, or make your hogs get sick, or whatever the case may be. You kind of took precautions against every kind of bad luck that there could be out there. And that's what superstition was built upon. That's the base of superstition, is actually fear of the unknown and the fear of the unknown of life. Not just the paranormal, supernatural unknown, but the fear of things that could happen in life to you. They felt so out of control with everything. There were only a few things. Here's the interesting part about all this superstition and stuff. They wanted to practice that because it gave them a little bit of control over things. If they felt that way anyway, it kind of could say, hey, I've got a little bit of control over my destiny, or what happens to make sure my chickens lay, or whatever. You still had that little control and you exercised that. And I think it made them feel psychologically, made them feel a whole lot better that way. And I can understand where they were coming from on that. Definitely. I think I've studied superstitions for years.
We're having some technical.
Superstitions are fascinating. Superstitions are very fascinating stuff. They give you an insight of the way people's minds used to work.
All right, let's see here.
I'm afraid I agree with you on that, John. I'm afraid that what we're seeing are some bad stuff going to come down the line here very shortly. That's why people need to start preparing
take care
themselves
of a few things.
spiritually and mentally, for what is, I think, about to happen. Mankind has always wanted to fly. We were always very jealous of the birds. We would look up and say, why can't I do that? You know, we've always wanted to fly. So now we do, but look how much trouble we have to go through to do that. We can fly, but we still can't fly as free as a bird. I always wanted
Not
a
yet.
jetpack.
Who knows? Who knows where we'll be in the next 40, 50, 60 years. Genetics increasing, manipulation, gene splicing. You never. Human beings may have wings in the next
we're not going to say anything
years.
about the king because he'll probably sick the reptilians on us. Okay.
My brother's on here. Okay. All right. Let's see.
Well, I'm going to say something about the thing about the church having gargoyles. Okay. You wouldn't think the church would want to mess around with demons.
Okay.
But here's the interesting thing about the early, especially the medieval church times. They felt like here's the interesting thing. It was sort of a Gnostic thing about it. They felt like God was good and evil. Okay, they felt that God could do evil and He could do good, which I don't go along with that thought because that would not depict a perfect God. But they had that kind of feeling that God could use demons too if He wanted to. But God would not do that because that would not be the ideal solution for anything. So don't believe the fact that God's ever going to work with demons because that's a whole different ball game. It's not going that way. Good only produces good. Evil can look like good, but it can only produce evil. That's just the way they work. But they had a different kind of a skewed version of that. And they had what was called, I know you're familiar with this term too, William, household magic. You know what that is? The little things you could do that, were like magic rituals and stuff.
Yeah.
With salt and different things like that. But it was very low-key magic. It wasn't. I remember one of them was if you had an unwelcome visitor in your house and they wouldn't leave, that you would take your broom and stand it on his handle in a corner, and that was supposed to make them leave. So that's household magic a little bit. It was more superstitious than it was actually the dark arts. Okay, it didn't go that far deep into that. It was just sort of a superstition acted out, you might say, like the ladder kind of a thing, or black cats crossing your path, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and if you want to keep evil out of your house, you take red clay chalk, like the bricks, the original bricks that were made, and you put a stripe across the front entranceway of your doorway so they can't enter. So.
Here's another thing, Ted. The first time I ever saw demons, it was in a church. That's one place. A church, just like a hospital I talked about, it can be very demonically infected because a lot of times that's where there's some trauma, there's some bad vibes going on there, and the negative is always attracted to that. But sure, there are demons in church. They go there every Sunday. There's a lot of them in our government too, but
they have to know both sides. Yeah, well, demons have to know both sides. Then even the devil, actually, Lucifer, actually, the Bible inside and out. You can use the Bible against people.
Oh yeah.
So
he knows the Bible
if you listen
better
to
than
his
any of
silver
us
tongue,
does. He knows the Bible better than we do. That's the first thing when he met Jesus on earth. He came up and quoted the Bible to Jesus. Think about that. Jesus quoted it back to him the right way, though, not the wrong way. It's the devil's intention that gets him in trouble. It's not good intentions at all. He's not going to give you a Bible passage for good intentions. You got to remember that. And that's the one thing that they kind of screwed up with a little bit in the Bible. The very famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer, when it says, "And lead us not into temptation." Really, what that supposedly meant in the way it was actually transcribed, it meant, "And let us not fall into temptation," which is really how you're supposed to say that. And it wasn't God leading you into temptation.
Yeah.
That's not God's job, but that's the way the translation. So you have to be here. And I've often told people, if you're really, really stuck on a Bible passage and something's really not, go back and look at it in the original Greek before it got translated into the Old English.
Exactly.
It tells you a whole lot of different things. Just like I told you about the book of Genesis.
Exactly.
It says at the beginning the world was without form and void. Actually, it didn't say void. That's English. The Greek thing was chaos. It was in chaos. It was all messed up. It was screwed up. I think that's where the dinosaurs came in, by the way.
No, Stuart, I'm not.
I think them pilots kind of did a job on you, didn't they? Well,
I'm waiting for I don't know what's going on. Yeah, they did their job on me. That's for sure. I'm worn out. I'm completely worn out. I'm about good for nothing right now. So that's why I'm sitting back enjoying the stories and stuff and the explanation for things. So
hanging in there by the fingertips.
I'm just, man, I'm beat. I'm surprised my back didn't break. I'm beat.
Well, that's the thing about it.
You want to keep
you start a project, seems like a good idea, but in the end you find out it wasn't.
Yeah. Getting into the whole flying humanoid thing. I
was just answering Stuart. No, actually, it's to scare the demons away. That was the mentality thing of it. Not to scare people to come in.
Yeah. Now, getting into the flying humanoid things, we know that there's Mothman's been sighted everywhere. We know about the Lachusa. We know about the Bat Squatch. We know about all those other sightings. But what do you think about humans that just seem to be, they don't have wings, don't have any jet propulsion whatsoever. They're not in a plane.
Well, let me tell you a quick story.
They don't have helium balloons under their arms.
Let me tell you a quick story. And I've not told this to many people before either. This happened to my mother many, many, many years ago. And I was probably, when this happened, I might have been 14 or 15. And at the time, I talked to her about it later, but it kind of brushed it off. But let me say this about my mother: was a very, very good Christian woman. I mean, she didn't tell lies. She was a very practical woman. She didn't make up stuff. She didn't have that, a far-ranging imagination like that. But one day she told me a story about what happened to her. That she was at the clothesline hanging out clothes one day, and she said, I just looked up in the sky. It was there were clouds, and it was sunny. It was partly a cloudy day. She said, I saw a man in the air. She said, he was way up in the clouds. I asked her, I said, well, what did he look like? She said, could you see his face? She said, no. he was too far off to see me. And my mother couldn't see good anyway. My mother could see good kind of close up, but far off, she had a problem with that. But she said this was a man, and he was standing up in the clouds. And she said I could see his arms and his legs. And he was, and he had on, he had on. She said it wasn't white, but sort of like a darker gray like color robe or something, some kind of clothes. She like I said she couldn't make out real minute details. And this really got on. I said, my mother's seeing something like that. She was not prone to hallucinations. She didn't drink or she didn't smoke. She didn't do anything like that. She was a good Christian woman. She wouldn't tell you a lie. Definitely would not go out of the way to tell you a lie. Definitely. So when that told me that, I said, well, she saw something, and it kind of bothered her spiritually that she saw this, you know. But I think it finally she accepted it. In other words, maybe she was supposed to see that, like a sign or something, you know. But it didn't scare her and it didn't bother her. But she just said it was the strangest thing that ever happened to her. That she would see a man up in the clouds like that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this was many years before there were such things as holograms and stuff like that, you know.
Right. Yeah. And that, so, you know, and you see these videos of these people, well, take for instance, the mother and child or grandmother and granddaughter that were videotaped in Russia back in the woods by this guy that was walking his dog with the little suspended in the air and just levitating off the ground about 10 feet, you know. And they compared it to the saint that used to be able to do the same thing. In fact, they showed a painting or a drawing of that saint in the same position body-wise as the little girl. So, I mean, obviously we have these abilities and gifts within us that if we are taught, you know, over a period of time, maybe we can do that. Maybe, you know, maybe there is a way for people to fly like a bird, you know. Maybe there is a way to.
Remember the famous story of the angels of Mons. Remember that? That were seen on the battlefield in World War One.
Yeah.
It stopped the battle. Actually, it scared the Germans to death. They thought it was Valkyries or something. They didn't know what was going on. But they say there's a thought on this that it could have been angelic intervention, but they say it may have been sort of like an hallucination type thing. In other words, sort of like a natural light thing, where the light was they were in trenches. You know, that was trench warfare back then. And it was very deadly stuff too, because a lot of that killing was bayoneting people. You know, that's bad. It's bad enough to shoot somebody. Man, to go into a trench and stab somebody to death. But that's what was going on. But they said these figures appeared in the sky, and some people, you know, scientists try to explain everything, say that maybe this was sort of like a light diffusement and was throwing their shadows on the clouds, because in war you have a lot of smoke and cloud stuff going on, you know, and that they saw this and it scared them because they never seen anything like it. That's a good explanation, but nobody's ever been able to recreate that, William. The angels of Mons.
Right. Yeah. But you know, you hear about stories though, Dennis, of hurricanes and tornadoes hitting houses and people huddling inside closets and praying for, you know, protection, and then they look above them as the roof is ripped off their house, and they're in this little area, and they see what they call butterfly people, okay, which, you know, are, you know, and they have depictions of them on buildings now, in Alabama and Mississippi and all that, you know, butterfly.
here's something we need to think about, okay? According to ancient superstitions and legends, every storm has a spirit. And it's usually an evil spirit. It's not a good spirit. That people say they have seen these spirits in storms, in hurricanes, cyclones, whatever the case may be, whatever, even thunderstorms, regular thunderstorms. They say they have a spirit, an evil spirit to them, that they will try to destroy you if they get you out in the open, especially. But I've often wondered, it seems like sometimes, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but it seems times that a storm has a mentality of its own in some ways. It can like hit you and then come back and hit you again, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? It almost, and I can understand why people believe that it has a spirit. It almost seems to have a mentality to it, and an evil, bad mentality at that. Uh, they call these things acts of God, but I think that's far from an act of God. I think storms could be instigated by demonic spirits or forces to do certain things. We don't know. But it makes you wonder that every storm supposedly has a spirit. Just like every animal supposedly has a spirit. Every being
Ted,
has a spirit.
I want to address. Yeah, I, I want to address Ted here for a second. The land of the free is not going to the land of Stalin. Okay, about that. So we ain't going nowhere. Anyways, Carlito says, my brother.
That's what I told somebody the other day. Okay,
says,
if it all goes down in the United States of America tomorrow, if it all really goes down, and we're being invaded right now on the southwestern border, I mean big time. You ought to see the drone footage on it. It's scary looking. Okay, if it all goes down the line on America tomorrow, who's gonna come in and save us? Oh yeah, flying over buildings and all that. Yeah, that's true. And like I say, people say they have seen these things in storms, and they see these things. Like my mother said, she saw this in the clouds. It wasn't a stormy day, but it was a partially cloudy day. And I talked to her about that several times, and she kind of got to where she didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to say anything more about it. Whether it disturbed her or became sort of a religious experience, or I don't know. But there's been a lot of sightings, especially in Mexico, of witches flying on broomsticks. I've seen pictures. They actually have a drone now that looks just like a witch on a broomstick. It's a drone. They've got one that looks like Snoopy, too, on these doghouse. I'm all about the Second Amendment, my friend. I think that's a God-given right. That's the right to bear arms. I know. I get you out there. That's my right to bear arms. Okay. Actually, I've been outside. It's been a very warm day. I haven't turned my air conditioning on yet.
That's your oozing.
I'm trying to rough it out.
Oozing machismo.
Yeah. Adrian. I don't want to excite the women too much, okay? Let's keep it down. I know there's some happily married women out there. I don't want to start any problems here.
I've seen a lot of the UK and the news isn't reporting the effects of the jobs. Neither is the UN. Yeah.
It's actually a heart problem.
I don't even want to get into the whole political thing.
They're having some myocardial problems here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
I don't,
Monterey.
you
Yeah.
know,
That's. I think it was one actually very famous photograph taken in
yeah,
the Monterey Mountains or something around there, around the mountain areas.
yep, yep, exactly, exactly. Yeah. Now the one sighting, I believe that they did debunk it and said that it was helium balloons.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are doing that too, and I don't know why. What would need to fill up about 25 helium balloons and put them in a black garbage bag and shape it like a human body and then let it
Mm-hmm.
loose? I don't understand what kind of mentality would do that. So
Did you? I was reading about some of these weather balloons that they send up. Yes, there are such things as weather balloons. Okay, uh, and they would actually listen to this.
they're UFOs.
They put charcoal powder in the balloons so that when the sun shines on them, it heats them up, and that's what makes them rise. Now, everybody go out and make yourself a weather balloon, okay? But after that's a pretty smart idea because hot air rises, of course. Uh, but there have been many reports of UFOs that turned out to be Chinese lanterns. That were floating around, because if you get it warmed up enough with a candle, it'll take off and fly too. But they can only supposedly go so far up. But here's the thing about it, and it's what really bugs me, okay? Between the holograms and all that, you don't know what you're looking at anymore, whether it's a drone or what the heck it is. I mean, nothing. I mean, they have drone dragons. They look like dragons that are drones. So, I mean, just because you see something that thinks you think is a dragon doesn't necessarily mean it is a dragon. Okay, I'm just using that as an example. And that's the world we live in anymore, and that's exactly where they want us, where we really question our own reality.
Mm-hmm.
That's very
Yeah.
true, Raven Creek. It's
Well,
always been a legend that every storm has an evil spirit. Why do you think they name storms
well,
after people?
I
They
want
give them human names. They almost have an identity.
sorry, I'm typing.
I think we're having a lag in our comments tonight too. It's kind of slow tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna end the show here because we are having some technical problems. I don't know if it's because of the storms coming in, but we definitely have some serious lags. So I'd rather just go back at it again in the morning and basically pick up where we left off, and go from there. So I want to thank everybody. If you can, follow us, like, heart, and share this out as much as you can. Subscribe to the Nighthawk High Strangeness podcast channel and Midwest Night Watchers channel. Okay. And also look for Dennis and I on other podcasts. I've got one coming up in June with the Blondes and Booze. A very, very dear friend. And look for another podcast of myself and Carlito and Dennis on the mysterious Into the Red Rabbit Hole podcast next Friday night at 10 o'clock. So we got a lot going on, Dennis. So,
And of course,
I'm
tomorrow
just
we
I'm
have
kind of
the.
worn out, and
Yeah.
yeah, go. Yep.
Well, yeah.
So,
Get you some rest and
but
recharge the
anyways,
batteries.
everybody, yeah, yeah, that's about what I'm gonna have to do. I'm really not feeling up to it right now. So, but we've been going for an hour and a half, and that's good. I want to thank you to Scott, Werewolf, Juno, my lovely wife Tracy, John, Cryptid Paranormal Kingdom, Carlito, Chiro. Thank you all for
Jessica.
being there. Amy, Jessica, Stewart, um, Tombstone, Ozzy Sue. Oh wow! Just all Raven Creek Charms. You know, all of you. Thank you very much. Okay, for being here. We love you all. You know, you're our extended family. Never forget that. You're weirdo warriors to the end. But this weirdo warrior right here is really, really tired and really, really weirdo worn out. So I'm definitely the hey hard tonight, man. So I'll see you all in the morning. Dennis, I'll see you in the morning, my brother. Okay.
All right.
And everybody, great rest of your night. And see you in the morning at 10 a.m. for coffee.